Hello, folks, and thanks for joining me this week. You know you're in for a treat when you hear that music because it's time for another episode of the Rec Poker Podcast. I'm your host, Jim Reed. This is a Chats edition that's brought to you by our friends at Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and Mark Prashant and website Amp. I have the best job in the world, so I get to host this podcast once or twice a week. And if you don't know what Rec Poker is, it's a free community for folks like us that want to learn about poker, learn together, celebrate together, and have a great time doing it. So come find your rail at rec.poker. It's free to join. I'm just one of the people that make everything happen over there. One of the people on the Wrecking Crew. If you want to find out more about the Wrecking Crew and everyone on it, you can go to rec.poker/crew, or you can just listen on because you're about to meet some of them tonight. Crew, why don't you tell these folks who you are and where they can find you?
I'm Chris Jones. You can find me on 5B5 on Twitter and 5x5 on PokerStars and pretty much everywhere else.
And I am John Somsky, also known as Poker Geek MN everywhere.
I'm Kim Kilroy. I am PetVet or PetVet33 in most places, but I am Fergie56 in our home games on PokerStars.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50 just about everywhere.
Now, every week on the Chats edition here, we invite someone associated with the world of poker to come in for an interview, whether it's a player, a coach, someone in the business side of poker. We're doing things a little differently this week. We've actually introduced Greg Max Chaos Clem, who is an active premium member here at Rec Poker. He's the guest this week, and he is the guest interviewer who is going to be putting some questions on the hot seat for Chris Jones, who everyone here is very familiar with. He's the member content director for everything we do at Rec Poker. You've heard his questions on the forums edition of the podcast several times. So Chris is here. He's offered himself as a lamb on the altar. And Greg's here to put some questions to him so we can all get to know Chris Jones a little better. So Greg, first of all, thank you for coming on the show. This was a great idea. Why don't you tell a little bit about yourself to the folks out there at Rec Poker and what made you come up with this plan?
Well, I have to say it wasn't really my plan to be on a podcast. I have never been on a podcast before. I'm a bit of a lurker to a certain degree here on Rec Poker. And I would say probably about, I've been a premium member for a year. I know that because I just got the bill to renew my membership. And about 6 months ago, I made a conscious decision to get more actively involved. And I really am glad I did. And I really do have to extend kudos to all of you for making such an awesome environment and resource for people like me who just play poker for fun. And I found that once I did get more involved, the payoff was huge. So well done, guys. As far as this situation goes, because I was lurking on the podcast, I did hear you mention Jim, and this is a while back, so I wasn't even really sure it was still active or not. He said, hey, if you're a premium member, you can reach out and say that you'd like to spend an hour or some time with any member of the Wrecking Crew talking about whatever you want to talk about. If you want to do a hand history, you can do that. If you want to just talk poker, you can do that and all that sort of thing. And I kept seeing on Discord, my Discord blowing up with Chris Jones' name on it, as far as all of these huge scores he's having and stuff like that. So I'm thinking, well, I'd like to sit down with this guy and find out a little bit more about how he got to where he is today. Kind of turn up the heat, ask him some tough questions. I'm kidding, Chris. These are easy questions. And so I reached out to Jim and said, hey, is that still an opportunity? Is that still a possibility? And he said, yeah. Well, actually, I didn't hear anything for a couple of days. And I thought, well, geez, do I like make a second run at this or not? And then Jim came back to me and he said, hey, we've got an idea. How would you like to interview Chris on the podcast? And I jumped on it. So I've done a ton of interviews in my life in a professional setting. I've never done a single one for fun. And I've never done a single one where I hope to get something out of it for me and only me. But so I'm excited to be doing that. And I do want to thank Chris for being willing to put up with all my questions and probably a lot of the crossfire conversation. But I hope I've come up with some questions that everybody's going to get something out of. So that's how I got to where I am right now. So
nice. Well, I'm excited for that. Before we get into the questions for Chris, Greg, what in your life has gotten you to the point where you've done all these interviews already? Is that in some professional
I'm
capacity?
a director in IT, so I have to hire people on
Gotcha.
a regular basis and that sort of thing. So, and I will tell you what's interesting about that is I really hate interviews. I mean, that's probably the least favorable part of my job, just because I never think they're very natural. I don't think people, really feel good about the situation. I don't feel good about it, and that sort of thing. So this is completely turning the tables on that. I'm excited about this. I'm actually going to have fun with this one. But that's my background in interviewing and that sort of thing.
Nice. Well, Chris Jones, meet Greg. Greg, meet Chris. Good luck to you both.
Yeah, Greg, thanks for doing this. I'm pretty honored to be asked to even do this. So I'm all yours.
Well, thank you, and thanks for taking the time. So, I'm probably going to start with somewhat of an impolite question. You never ask somebody about their income. That said, I've heard you've had some serious scores, and I'm not sure everybody knows just how well you've done. Could you kind of recap those scores for us?
Yeah, I mean, I've had a really nice little stretch these past, I don't know, 6 weeks or so. So I won the Sunday special on ACR. That was for about 21K, and at the same time there was a big 2-day tournament that I satellited into that was like a $600 buy-in that I ended up winning about 9 or 10K with that one. And then a few weeks later, I binked the Sunday warm-up or whatever they call it on ACR. So that was another about 20K or so. So and there have been a few others in there that have been some deep runs, but nothing quite like that. But those have been a nice little hot streak right here.
Could you believe it when you won that first 21K when it rolled over?
No, well, and I'll tell you that before COVID, and that's like prior to COVID, and even prior, like before I even got involved with Rec Poker, I had made a sort of commitment to myself, and I'd been really studying and working hard to like try to like improve my poker game, like not just show up and hope to win, but actually like show up and like have a chance to win. One of the and I'd started to do a little bit better in sort of smaller daily tournaments, a little bit online. But I had, before COVID hit and whatever, I had really made a commitment to myself that this is the year I want to make a 5K or a 5-figure score or better, right? I wanted to get that 5-figure score. And that was going to be one of those sort of kind of like posts that I wanted to reach, because it was one that had, I'd had a bunch of sort of in that 4-figure range, but never that 5-figure one seemed elusive to me. Like I could never quite get there. And so, but then COVID kind of got in the way, and I really made a transition during COVID to like trying to really focus more on my online game, because I'd primarily been a live player. And obviously that was not an option anymore. So those two things kind of came together and built toward this sort of progression, which that was something I'd been wanting to do for a while here. So it was pretty exciting to do.
Well, congratulations.
Thanks.
That's really awesome, especially
Thanks.
Considering the idea that you made an absolute concerted effort to improve your game, and then to see the payoff on the other side is just absolutely awesome. How long have you been playing, Chris? And kind of give us a sense for how this whole thing came to be. And
yeah, I mean, I've been playing since college, like there's a different thing between playing poker and like trying to be good at poker and taking poker seriously. So like I've always enjoyed the game. I've loved it. I've watched the WSOPs since I was since Moneymaker basically. And it's always been something that, and if I could get together with some friends and just play on a Friday night, that was like kind of all time, like let's do this every night if we can. But I didn't really start, and then I started I would go to like Running Aces and Canterbury and play in places like that, but I didn't really take it very seriously as a player until because it was always this sort of like, oh, someday I'll go to the WSOP, someday I'll go play in the main event, someday I'll, there's all this kind of someday stuff, but it wasn't very serious. And it was really, really kind of part-time recreational, very like, I hope to do well, but it was more for fun. But then I had a health scare in my life that's really transitioned me to thinking like, that someday might not always be there. And that if you have if you have some of these some days, that you really should just make them nows. And that was what really transitioned me to really taking the game more seriously. And that was about 2016, when I was kind of going through all that and dealing with some of the health things. And then I actually went to the WSOP for the first time in 2016.
Have you been back to the WSOP since?
Yeah, I went back then pretty much. And then so 2016, I did not go play in the main event. I went and played in like the first Colossus that was like that mess of 20,000 people that they had. And I did all that. And then the next year I went and I had a goal of, I didn't have the money to play in the main event, but I had a goal of like making my way into it. So I went and I studied satellites and I played in some of the satellites, and I did actually qualify into the main. So I played that year in the main, and I've gone back. I think I've gone back, well, until I didn't go this year, but I went 2016, 17, 18, and 19, I think.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. How'd you get involved with rec poker?
Gosh, that's a good question. It was, I reached out to Steve. I was a fan of the podcast, and I reached out to Steve. And I said, it was, I don't know if he's just joined us. I don't know if he remembers this, but I reached out to him during he was doing the first versions of some of the things that we're doing online, the Peel thing that Eric Binkley's doing. He was doing these play and learn sessions that were live, where people played at one table, or I think they actually had 3 tables at this hotel that they had set up, and they were playing hands, and everyone was sort of explaining away, how they'd show their hand at the end of the hand, and everyone would talk about, the choices they made. And I went to that, and I was kind of excited about it, but I reached out to Steve after that, and I was just kind of asking him about, what are some of your thoughts about, I know you've got this great podcast, you did this great event, but what are some of your thoughts about like building community and connecting players, and sort of like how could this maybe, could rec poker, do something like that? Because I knew that I was really seeking more people who, because the people in my life who played poker were still the people I had played with in sort of my college and high school days, who loved to get together on a Friday night. But the idea of like getting better at poker, that's not really what it was all about. It was all about just like hanging out. It was social. It was and like for me, I wanted something more, because I was really starting to understand the complexities of this game, and how much you have to dig in to like actually get good at it, and how complicated it is, and how important it is to like have people around you that you can talk about with poker. So that was something I was really craving and seeking. And so that's so that conversation began some other conversations. And then I don't remember why I ultimately got more involved, but that was the first step.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, finding people that actually like to talk about it and think about it is huge. I had friends that got me into the game a few years back, and they take it seriously while they're playing, but I don't think they do too much off the felt. So finding a group of people that like to talk about it is absolutely awesome. Lately, I've asked myself, what would Chris do? And I've taken to shoving pocket fives pre-flop at all stack sizes.
That's the first approach. That's the first approach.
It's not working out for me.
Yeah, well, it takes some nuance.
Yeah, I guess question 1 would be, what am I doing wrong? And we can come back to that, but so I think everybody wants to know.
I'll say this. It is a little bit of a misnomer that I love this hand in every situation. I think the reason I love this hand is there's a few reasons. I mean, I think it is one of the better disguised hands that you can really have. It also has a little bit more playability than like pocket twos or pocket threes, but it's the kind of hand that when you do hit it big, maybe I'm just, I'm fine, but I feel like it's the kind of hand that you get paid off more. There's also this very interesting thing about fives and tens is that you cannot make a straight in poker without a 5 or a 10 either in your hand or on the board. It's impossible. And I kind of like that sort of that blocker effect slash, either I'm going to have the straight or I'm going to know that you probably don't. So if there's a bunch of low cards and I've got fives, I kind of like that aspect of them too. So there's some aspects that I actually like, that it's not just pure raw aggression. Let's 5-bet these all the time.
So there's no superstition behind the choice then. There's
no, not really. Not really. I just, I tend to like them.
That's cool. I will say I picked up on the data point of no straights without fives or tens off this podcast. And I went home and put it in my notes, and it's in my little warm-up routine and all that stuff. So yet another benefit of rec poker. I'm guessing that one of two things, either you're currently have a full-time job, or maybe you're retired, I'm not sure, but it's not poker, at least at this stage. I know Steve wants to talk to you about that. I heard him mention that the other day. That said, what do you do for a living when you're not at the tables?
So I definitely have a full-time job. It keeps me very busy. I work at a literary arts center. It's an arts center here in Minneapolis called the Loft Literary Center. We present educational offerings for people who want to become writers. We do classes and events with a lot of traveling writers. We do an annual book festival, and we do an annual writers festival. So we do things where people are either coming to meet everyone. If you want to get a book published, you need an agent. So they come and try to meet agents and pitch their work to the agents, and the agents maybe sign them or don't or whatever. So we do some of that. And then we have a really big book festival. The first year we hosted Stephen King. We've hosted, some pretty big household name authors as part of that. And I do a lot of our outreach and marketing and graphic design and website development and stuff like that for that work.
I just finished one of Stephen King's books this morning, as a matter of fact.
Oh, yeah? Really?
Dr. Sleep. Yeah. The reason I asked the question, probably more so than that, that's interesting, by the way, because that's not what I would have predicted you would have answered. So you don't really see any corollaries in the sense that what you're good at with your job has allowed you to be good at poker or develop your skills in poker.
Well, here's what I would say to that. I've always just been fascinated by poker, but I think that writing and poker share more sort of similarities than you might think on the surface. I think that a good somebody who knows the constructs and the sort of like the ways that you tell story, that actually translates really well to how you construct and deconstruct betting lines. And for me, it's often like, and I think I've talked to some people on in rec poker about this before, but for me, there is always this test of like, if you walk away from a movie sometimes, or you're reading a book and you just put it down and you can't finish it, and there's like this sort of this sense of yourself, like, this is a waste of my time. This is not believable. This is really disjointed or disconnected. And if you get that sense during a poker hand, that is a really good sign that something's up, something's amiss. And I would say that I use that a lot. I use that, the more I understand about the basics of poker and like how lines are constructed, and then apply that sort of that logic to it, it actually really helps me sniff out some bluffs that don't make any sense and things like that. So I think there are some corollaries if you look for them.
That's fascinating, because we spent so much time talking about the math, but nothing about the intuition and this just doesn't smell right idea. So that's fascinating.
Right. And it's helpful to know the math so that like you have to know that too. You can't just be the sort of the gut feel player anymore. I think you have to be able to understand the theory and the aspects of why you're making decisions and what are the best ones. But if you can add on, I think that some people overly rely on that stuff, is my take. I'm not a super expert on this, but I do think that there is room to find space in the game for that. And I think that's especially true of exploitive things. In fact, those tournaments you just mentioned, the ones that they won pretty big, there's some key spots in each of those tournaments where I went way off what would be sort of on a GTO chart, or the sort of the optimal play, because I had I'd seen some things and the line didn't make sense. And so, and I made a lot of chips in a couple of spots where, probably should have folded, or probably should have done something different than I did. And so I think it's good to be able to balance some of those things and sometimes rely on some of those instincts.
So when you're describing that, it's not just about how you're interpreting the actions of your opponent, but it's also about the story that you're telling as well.
Correct. Yeah, no, I think those things have to go hand, and like similarly to, like we were just talking about writing. I mean, any good writing story has to start with sort of a protagonist, and they have to face either somebody or something that is a force of antagonism, right? And I think if those things aren't, so you have to look at how they're working together, I think. So yeah, you have to look at your own line too. You have to look at, like, what am I representing? What story am I telling? Does my story even make sense? That's another really great question to ask yourself all the time, because sometimes it's like there's a really tempting bluff to take, right? And it's like, yeah, but who's going to buy this? Like, why? If I haven't laid, and laying the groundwork for big bluffs is something that I think is a lot of players don't think about. They sort of arrive at a street and it's like, okay, well, I can't win this, so I better bluff. And it's like, but if you've just landed there and you haven't been thinking about this for the whole hand, you might be in a lot of trouble.
Guilty as charged, by the way. So how much, having said what you just said, and that's fascinating, by the way, that's a really interesting angle of things. How much do you pay attention to the math? Do you still focus on the math separately?
Oh yeah. I mean, I'm always looking at sort of pot odds, and what are I look at distribution a lot. That's another way that I make decisions. I would say this sort of like feel intuition is really more of an exploit, and it's based on, I'm seeing somebody who's playing wildly out of line, basically, and I'm trying to find places where I can take advantage of that. But definitely, I think you have to play with the fundamentals to start.
Right. I was watching one of your recorded Twitch streams yesterday.
The ones that have been failing.
While I was watching football, yeah, you were having a tough time with the computer.
I've got it. So one of the highlights for me of this was the last tournament. I said, well, if I announced it on the if I bink this, I'm buying a new computer. So that computer's on the way.
Yeah, you should have bought a handful of computers already by my math here. But as I was watching it, you were talking about a particular opponent at a particular table in a particular hand, and I think this was the person, and I'll butcher the name. It was ACabu, something like that. Does that ring any bells? ACabu.
Yeah.
And your comment when you were talking about this person, you said, you don't really hand out the title of truly elite poker player to many people, but you hand it out to this guy. Mm-hmm. And to that end, you really don't need to get involved in a hand with him if you don't really have to. And I'm curious as to, in your perspective, what makes him such an elite player? Is it just his statistics on, SharkScope, or is it something that you've seen?
It's both. So statistics will back this up, right? Like just has a top of the line, like a great ROI, consistent big results, plays in big stakes. So all of those things sort of line up. But then you see some of the plays and they're just, this player, I know exactly what you're talking about. It's like a ACabu, something. I think they're from Brazil or something like that. But they are consistently putting people into really challenging spots that I don't see other players doing very often. They're the kind of player that's not afraid to put themselves in sort of like maybe precarious situations, but mostly they're winning in those kinds of spots. So like they're the kind of player that you're not going to be able, so like, you know, if you sort of like, you know, there's some players I think you can like call with like, you know, you're in the cutoff, somebody's open, you have ace 10 offsuit. Maybe you can flat some players, right? Like, but this player is going to make your life a living hell if you, even though you've got position on them and maybe, you know, you get your 10, right? You get a flop of a 10, but they're just going to make your life a living hell. And so like, it's the kind of player that it's important to sort of recognize them. And then I'm either going to be more aggressive with them. I'm pretty much only going to be 3-betting a hand like that against that player. Or I'm just going to eject and say, this is not a good spot for me. There's better players for me to sort of work around.
Interesting. Have you have you considered, or do you think you have a sense for what they're doing that's leading to such a, you know, a feeling of, wow, this is uncomfortable?
I mean, I think that they're playing, you know, close to optimally in terms of their ranges, their opening ranges.
Right.
But then post flop, what I see players like that do is take that to the next step. I think that, you know, like we can all learn our ranges and we can all be tough to play against unexploitably pre-flop. You know, that's something that I think a lot of us can commit to doing. But the really, truly, I think elite players are the ones that can take that and then play post-flop and put you in spots where they're not going to just try to sort of always navigate to showdown with a marginal hand. They're maybe going to pick bluffs that you don't think people are going to pick very often. They're going to go for thin value and put you in sort of some, so they're really going to try to eke out as much as they can and then make really big bets in really big high leverage spots. So you're going to have to like really decide that, you know, really polarizing spots, and you're going to have to, you know, put your tournament life on the line and say with your, you know, ace 10 with a 10, you're going to have to say, well, do they have the flush draw or do they just got it? And the people who can consistently do that are the ones that I think are really hard to play against, because then you're almost in a guessing game against them, right? And then I'd rather play against people I'm more sure I'm beating.
That's a great answer. And because one of the questions that's always sort of lingered in the back of my mind is I hear a lot of discussion around skill advantage.
Mhm.
And I'm saying, if you're sitting there holding 7-2, I don't really know what skill advantage you're going to derive that's going to lead to a result other than, you know, fold. So that was a great answer, because I think that highlighted a lot of the elements of the skill that people can really bring to a situation or to a hand. You created a perfect segue for my next question earlier when you kind of described your background and how you approached the goal of, I want a 5-figure score and that sort of thing. How much time do you spend these days studying your poker game off the felt, and how has that changed? You know, pick a time frame, last 12 months, 18 months, or whatever.
I try to every weekend when I can, I try to get up on Saturday mornings, and I either am doing some stuff for Rec Poker, or I'm doing, like, I do some of our seminars and some of the video work for that kind of thing, or I'm doing a study session where I'm looking back at hands that I played. So I try to do that. Definitely, that's like a really big time where I do it. But then I'm also trying to do decent study session at least one other time a week, sometimes two, where I'm really looking at so I'm either looking at my own database, or I'm looking at you know, there's a lot of content out there that I'm trying to keep up on, and so I'm watching some of those videos or learning some of those things, or I'm, you know, I also listen to a ton of poker podcasts. And so that it's less intentional study, but it ultimately informs things that I might want to study. There's certain podcasts where they really go in depth, deep into a hand, and they open up some windows for me in terms of like, oh, that's something I haven't thought about much. I should explore that more.
Which ones do you like that are favorites?
So some of my favorites are the breakdown with the poker guys, because they just do one hand, and I think they do a really good job of looking at really high level play, and like how these pros that are like making really big moves against each other, what are they thinking about? Why are they doing this with this one and not this one? And so that's one I really like. The Just Hands podcast, I think is a really good one. It's another one where often more cash game focused, but it's got a similar bent where they're really going in depth to that. And Thinking Poker podcast with Andrew Brokus, who I just think the way he thinks about the game is amazing.
Yeah, he thinks on a whole other plane.
Yeah,
the rest of us.
Yeah. And actually, I should a hat tip to him. So he does these video coaching sessions. And I signed up for one of those with him right before I had all my big scores. So I don't know if I just got lucky and won a lot, or if but he did have some really good tips. So I sent him a database to review. He sent me back a video where he kind of went over it, and it was amazing stuff. He's a top-notch poker mind.
That was probably very valuable because it was specific to your hand history.
Yeah,
and your
I
game.
highly recommend it. It's really reasonable too. It's so I'm not going to just show for Andrew, but like it's a good deal, and you should look into it.
Yeah, when he pitches that's exactly what he says. He goes, your ROI will be very, very strong because it's recorded. You can watch it more than once. You can, all that stuff. So, you mentioned earlier that you really kind of spent most of your career in a live setting and then switched online. Did I hear that right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Is that still the case, or are you still with COVID finally starting to calm down a little bit? Are you able to get back to live play?
I've still got some things in my life that makes me a little bit more cautious than most. So I'm still primarily playing online. I am, hoping to get back and play a little bit more live, but it has not been, it's a decision why I didn't go to the WSOP this year. And so I have not played live very much as a lot of people I know have, and I'm still itching for it. I miss the live game a lot, but I have kind of grown kind of fond of like just waking up and having my morning coffee and just kind of roll it into this office space and be able to play poker. That's pretty cool. Like there's something I've grown to like about the online game too. And I think Rec Poker, actually, the ability to connect over Discord and have people sort of like cheering you on as you play, even though it's kind of this lonely, isolated sort of experience where you're playing online, I think is really valuable too. Because that would be something that if I didn't have that, it would just feel like this sort of like, I don't know, just playing on my computer. Here I am, kind of, I don't know, but that's been really great.
Right. Whether it's live or whether it's online, when you're playing, do you strive to have a very structured thought process, or do you just allow your instincts and your intuition and that off the felt study time guide you in the moment?
I would say I'm very structured in terms of I really done a lot of study to learn my opening ranges, to learn certain spots. I've done a ton of study around study time dedicated to sort of ICM situations and learning like how to sort of approach those different kind of spots, because I think that people don't do enough of that. I think it's and I feel like it's an area where I have a big advantage. So that I'd say is really structured. When I'm actually in a hand, the things I'm thinking about the most online, I'm really thinking about looking at some statistics, sort of HUD statistics, notes that I'm taking on the players. Like you mentioned, I do sort of color code players based on things that I've observed from them. So there are some sort of structural things like that, I guess, that I kind of like a checklist of like, what kind of player am I playing against? Okay, what does that mean for the kind of range they're going to have? Okay, what does that mean for the rest of the development of this hand? But I don't know. It doesn't get much more structured than that for me. Then I'm trying to figure out the spot and where I'm at and how to proceed from there.
Right. Has it been that way for a long time, or was that a change you made recently that you feel like contributed to the success that you've seen recently?
I would say that was a change that continues to evolve, but it's one that I made before I went to that first WSOP. So that was a change where I was like really starting to become more aware of, I'm not just going to open King 10 under the gun one because I've got a good feeling this time, right? Or like this might be the time where I'm going to be really disciplined and fold this every time, right? Like that this is just a trash hand at this position, and yeah, occasionally it's going to just bink Broadway or something, but you're going to lose money over the long run if you keep doing those kinds of things. And so I have become really disciplined about those kinds of decisions. And that was really when I started taking things more seriously.
Gotcha. I think I've heard you reference solvers on more than one occasion. Are you a big fan of solvers?
I'm a big fan of solvers when I'm really lost and I'm looking for some direction of where we're at. I love looking at them and thinking about how they approach the game in a way like that's like, well, the solver really likes checking here. That's really interesting because most of us would bet here. Well, why does the solver prefer that here? And like really thinking about it from that. So I'm not looking for prescriptive, like, oh, this means I should check all the time here, because I don't think we're playing in a solver world. But I think it's a really helpful tool to really like look at your own patterns of thinking and sort of examine, am I doing this because I really just, even though the solver says, I should be checking here, I'm betting here because people don't play like this. Nobody's gonna, like you go through a checklist, but it tests your assumptions, and that I think is a really valuable exercise.
That's good, because some of what I've been challenged with in my own thinking when it comes to solvers is I don't play against perfect players.
Right.
I play against highly erratic recreational people. So the
Right.
idea that I have to either worry about being exploited or assume that they're playing GTO, therefore I should try to play GTO. It doesn't feel, this is just a stream of consciousness, it doesn't feel like a good use of my time to kind of really go down that path. But I like your idea and your consideration of trying to understand the why behind it saying what it's saying. Right. I think that's good.
And Frank, with all these sort of tools that are coming out, they're most of them are subscription based. People put a ton of hours into building these, but you have things like Range Trainer Pro, that are doing these post flop tools, and they're doing a lot of the solver work for you out there. And I think that is another great way that recreational players can start to look into those. You should look into some of these. I'm not pushing for it, but Range Trainer Pro, DTO, BBZ, there's a bunch of these out there. Odin, they're varied in, some are really expensive, some are less expensive. They're all not cheap. But if you want to spend a really intensive time studying for you could just sign up for a few months and really look at one of these tools. I think there are things you can learn if you go in thinking, I'm going to test, like I always, like, for instance, I just was having a conversation on Discord today with a bunch of people. There was a hand that came up yesterday in a big tournament that I was playing. I had King Jack on a King Jack 3 board. And it's a hand, and I was in the small blind and the opener was in the cutoff. And I checked to them from the flop, and they bet, And that is a hand, and it was 2 hearts. It was king of hearts, jack of hearts, 3 of spades. And so I have king jack. I've got top 2 on a 2-heart board. That is a hand that I will 100%, pretty much 100% of the time be check raising. Like, well, it depends on stack depths, I guess, but for the most part, as a rule, that would be one that I'm just like, that's a check raise. I always check raise that. And I'm even thinking about this today. I ran a solve on it, and the solver really likes calling. Like a lot of the time, it likes a call there. And these are the kind of things that then I start to like test my own, like, well, wait a minute. What am I doing here? Why am I doing this? Am I getting myself into some rough spots because I'm always taking this kind of line? And maybe I'll come back and just say, but you know what? It's a draw heavy board and I'm always going to be check raising. But I think questioning those kinds of assumptions is where this gets really valuable.
Oh yeah, for sure. We were having Jim was leading a session over the weekend where we were talking about the difference in cash games and tournaments. And one of the lines that we got on had to do with just charts, pre-flop charts that have gone through solvers that are out there and available. And to me, that's something that it was like a light bulb moment, in the sense of, I worry sometimes that I'm too restrictive with my ranges, and I'm trying to figure out how can I play off, what should I be playing off the button, cut off, with different positions and all that kind of stuff. And it occurred to me, well, there's a good baseline. I'll start there, because there's some logic behind it, whether I understand it or don't. There's some logic behind it. So,
yeah, for sure.
Do you use any kind of warm up when you play?
I try to do. So one of the other things I love, you are getting into the secrets here. One of the other things I love about online poker is I will usually start. So I'll start in the morning and I'll do a little bit of meditation, and then I do some exercise. But before and while I'm playing for the first hour or so, I like to be moving. I'm moving around. I'm still paying very close attention to what's going on, but I'm like, I'm walking around. I'm getting all my steps in. I'm doing all those kinds of things. I'm stressed. I keeps my body, keeps my mind active, and I really like that. It really it's a kind of thing that, like, those long days live where you're just sitting at the table and you can't move around are really hard on the body. And I love the freedom in the online world where you can just sort of like keep playing but be able to kind of move around a lot.
That's a good point. Yeah, I suppose getting up in a live environment and kind of doing circles.
It's a little weird, right? Like, it's when you're in your basement, you can just kind of like do it, but right, but like if you start doing laps around the table when you're, that people might look at you a little weird.
How about tools? I know you've made reference to tools. Do you have any favorite tools that you use, or those that you go back to time and time again? Flopzilla.
Yeah, I would say Flopzilla and GTO Plus are the ones that I use quite a bit. And then I do use Range Trainer Pro a decent amount. I just find it's a really good tool, and and it's reasonably priced, and so I like that one. But there's a lot of good ones out there.
And kind of a linkage to that, not tool wise necessarily, but do you have any all-time favorite resources from a study perspective that you find yourself going back to over and over and over again, whether it's a video, a book, anything?
Yeah, I mean, it kind of goes back to, I think, to Andrew Brokus. I mean, the books that he's written about, Play Optimal Poker and Play Optimal Poker 2, I think is the second one called, are, I think, phenomenal resources. Some of his training videos, I think, are phenomenal. And ultimately then I really love listening to smart people talk about poker hands. So through Rec Poker, we have some affiliate relationships. So there's poker coaching, there's Learn Pro Poker, there's a decent Solve for Why, and I think there's some people associated with each of those that I'm big fans of. I love listening to Matt Hunt. He's got some great videos on Solve for Why. I really love the way he thinks about the game. Matt Affleck on Poker Coaching, I think, is just brilliant with breaking down hands, talking about, exploits versus, certain spots and solvers. I love listening to Ryan LaPlante's coaching sessions. I think he does a great job of talking to I think there's a lot of great stuff out there, and that's not, there's a ton of other great stuff out there too that I don't have time to access all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. Just doing a quick time check. I think we're almost out of time. I have one question left, and it's the kind of question that's sort of intended to encapsulate a lot of what you've talked about. I mean, in my business life and in professional life, I rely heavily on the 80-20 rule. In any given situation, I can become overwhelmed pretty quickly. And poker's especially a situation where I can get overwhelmed because there's so much stuff out there. There's so many things to consider, so many resources to study, this, that, and the other. In your experience leading you from wherever over that portion of your career where you said, I'm going to make a conscious effort to get better, I'm going to make that 5-figure score, and then bam, it happened. What would you say is the 20% of everything you've looked at that's generated 80% of your benefit?
Ranges. I think there's 3 things: ranges, short stack play, and ICM. If you could study those 3 things, like know your ranges, know how to play a short stack, and know what to do in ICM spots, your ROI, I think, would go up.
Awesome. That's all I got, Jim. And Chris, thank you. Thanks so much for fielding all my questions.
Yeah, no, thanks. This is fun.
Yeah, way to go, Greg. Hats off to you, man. This was some good questions and some great answers too. So this might not be the last time we do something like this here on the show. You just never know, folks. All right, well, why don't we hear from our friend Jonathan Little for a second, and then we'll come back on the back half and close this out with some community happenings.
Have you ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead? What do you do when you have a flush draw? Do you raise it or do you just call? What do you do with ace king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
There you go, folks. And if you go to PokerCoaching.com/recpoker and you sign up and you don't think that what Jonathan Little is putting out there is worth your time or money, he told me personally he'll send you a money back guarantee. So you got nothing to lose. Go tell him that the guys and gals at Rec Poker sent you. So Greg, thanks, man. This was a fun idea, and I'm glad we decided to do it here on the air with the show. It's time Rec Poker Nation got to know a little more about Chris Jones. So thanks for teasing out some of those intimate details.
Thanks for allowing me to do it. I really enjoyed
it. Well, it's been fun enjoying your voice in the room for more of our strategy discussions. And I know you've enjoyed getting more into the premium membership and all the events and stuff that we have going on here. And it's just, you said it at the top. It's better when we're talking about this stuff together and learning together and sharing our insights. And, some people only learn by burning their hand on the stove themselves. But some people, they can learn from other people burning their hand on the stove. So God bless it. That's what we're all trying to do here. Let's learn from other people's pain. We don't have to make all those mistakes ourselves. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about here before we head on out. We've got the Heads Up Challenge coming for December that John can talk a little bit about when we get into the monthly home game or the weekly home game winners. I know, are we breaking news a little? We've got some exciting news about Gareth James, who's going to be getting a little more involved in Rec Poker happenings over the next little while. So I'm excited to talk more about that. And we have a certain national anthem update that we can also get up to now that everyone's home from beautiful Las Vegas and debts have been paid. So these are all actually, they're fairly John Somsky centric. John, would you like to start talking about a certain oration, or would you prefer to get through the home games first and then we can start talking about that?
Let's wait for the home games. We'll get to the important stuff first here.
That sounds good.
So, now for the listeners who may not know this, Jim and I did not overlap in Las Vegas at all.
Brutal.
He was there, and then I was there. And Jim has had this big. He's been planning the Canadian national anthem for Steve. He brought a hat and a shirt for him to wear, and was really going to make this great big event. And then I show up, and I am shocked and appalled that Jim did not actually have Steve sing the national anthem.
It's true.
I was just, how could he have done this? You had one job.
One job. Literally one job.
Just couldn't do it.
No.
So I decided that we were going to do it the morning of the seniors tournament.
Can I just add that how does the Yankee end up being the one who compels this debt to be paid? I mean, that's
you see, I'm the responsible one of the core team, so
it's true.
I just got to make sure that it happened.
John's the guy that we if something actually has to get done, then we make sure that that's on John's list. I'm pretty good at talking about things. John and Steve are the only ones that actually get anything done around here.
So anyway, the night of the seniors tournament, after we had played that day, I was with Steve and I said, "Oh, swear word," and he said, "What's wrong? Like, did I hurt myself?"
It was totally out of the blue. All of a sudden, he's just like, "Oh."
And Steve said, "Well, I don't think I've ever heard you swear before." Well, I do swear, just not around people usually. And anyway, the reason I swore was because I forgot to have him sing the national anthem. So anyway, we did manage to get it done. We did it the next morning, the day of the I think, was it day 2 of the Colossus or day 1?
It was one of the fights, the Colossus.
Yeah, it was either it was a day 1, whether it was B or A or whatever, I don't know. Anyway, we all got there, and the Joe from Run Good Gear was there to take pictures of us, and then he belted out the national anthem in front of everyone. People, to just show how big of a spectacle the WSOP is, people just thought this was normal planned event, just watching him. And then at the end, everyone started clapping, and I think, he belted it out the way like he'd sung it his whole life. So you'd really think he was Canadian there.
I think people were being like respectful in the hallways, like they thought this was like a kickoff of the Colossus or something. Like, is this a former Canadian winner or something? Like, they're like pausing in the hallway, like, what is happening here?
Well, good for you guys for putting it together.
It was funny.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was so sure we were going to do it that I stopped at Pearson Airport on the way down and bought a red Canada shirt and hat so that we would be equipped when it happened. And then I just totally dropped the ball when we were down there. So John, my hat's off to you, sir. Thank you for putting this together. And Steve, thanks for being such a great sport about this whole thing. You really delivered. You really delivered, man. That was quite a performance.
Well, I decided if I was going to do it, I'm going to do it. Like, I didn't want to, like I lost the bet, so I was going to repay it, but like I kept saying, I'm not going to make it happen. Like, I'm not going to make it happen. And I was like, okay, every day kind of went by, like nothing happened. I'm like, sweet. And then John said he's going to do it. Then he kind of forgot. I'm like, sweet. And he's like, we're doing it. And he's like, we're doing it. Like, I'm like, I don't know if we have time between, because Joe took photos and we had the Colossus and we all, we're waiting to get in. John's like, no, we're doing it now. So he kind of said, it's happening. Like, well, if we're going to do it, let's do it, And so I've watched enough Canadian hockey that I sort of channeled my inner hockey Canadian anthem singer. And I'm like, screw it, let's go. Like, I don't care what the pitch is, but it's going to be loud. That's the end of the day. So it was super fun. And I had people coming up after me. They're like, so where are you from? Like, what part of Canada are you from? Edmonton. And I'm like, I lost a bet. And then I think they felt really bad. Like, it was a joke, they're all excited that we have all this Canadian pride. And I'm like, yeah, no, I lost a bet.
Well, I'll tell our listeners, if you're interested, just stay tuned at the end of the episode and maybe you'll get a little Easter egg. But if you really want to see it in all its glory, go to the Rec Poker YouTube channel. Go to YouTube and search for Rec Poker Community. It's the #1 video on our Rec Poker Premium, our promo video playlist. So it should be right there at the top. Go take a look at that. I think my favorite part is at the end when one of Steve's admirers from the crowd says, "Dude, that was awesome. Do you have a Snapchat?"
Why did you hear that? Did somebody say that?
Yeah, and you can hear Steve. Steve has obviously never been asked before if he has a Snapchat. This is a great reaction. So I hope people do get a chance to go and enjoy that.
God.
And yeah, Steve, thank you so much, man. That's a pleasure, and I know our Canadian listeners do appreciate it. Also,
It's nice to have the debt paid. Like
get that one off the books. I know that's been
there
weighing
will be
on me.
fine print on any of the next debts that are the next bets that are made.
And I believe it was Kelly Stork who was the person who asked about the Snapchat, because she recorded it on Snapchat and didn't know how to get it anywhere else.
Oh, that's right. Okay. So it's on Snapchat somewhere. If you know Kelly, I don't follow her on there.
That's fantastic.
Oh,
Well,
God,
that
it
was great.
fun.
And when you hear it, I'll take, if anyone wants to book Steve for an event, birthdays, bar mitzvahs, graduations, hockey games, you can email jim@rec.poker. We'll find a very reasonable rate, set that up for you. He does all sorts of national anthems. It's not just the Canadian national anthem. So yeah, don't be afraid to reach out for that. Let's make it happen, folks.
Nice.
All right. So anyway, I'm looking forward to that. You might see that pointed to a few times over the next few weeks here and there around Rec Poker. John, why don't you take us through some other happenings in the home game style?
Well, just to completely change topics then.
I don't want to hear Steve's name mentioned once in this segment.
No, not at all. Well, I am glad that at least he saved his run good. You know, he didn't go out and bink a bunch of tournaments in Vegas. He waited, came back November 3rd. I think that was your first day back, right?
Yeah, I got back on the 2nd, I think. Yeah.
Okay, November 3rd, Rec Poker Steve Friendland won the National No Limit Hold'em Championship Series and propelled himself to the top of the POY ranking. I think he has like about a 50-point lead. So it's going to be tough. And he's won it twice this year. So he is the first person to win 2 of the No Limit Hold'em Championship events in the same year. I mean, it's not a Patty 98 type of trend.
And Colin Anderson Gloves 1010 wasn't able to play. So there's a big asterisk with me taking the lead on that deal.
Hey, he knew what he was getting in for.
Okay, then we have our daily series, a big deal. Won his or her second nightly victory. Isnma Spike got his 4th nightly victory.
Spike's back.
Then MN Ted Phil Fuhrer, back-to-back days, got his 5th and 6th nightly victory for the year.
Way to go, Phil.
And then Keck Geek, who's Keck Geek Senior, Mark Kiki, got his 4th nightly victory for the year.
It sounds pretty impressive until you consider what Jacob's getting up to. You know?
Yeah. That is true.
Must be tough living in the shadow of your own son. All right, going on.
Colin Anderson, feeling bad for himself and sorry for himself, had to redeem himself and won the daily mixed victory for his first daily mixed victory for the year.
Nice.
Oslo Burger Tron Vidar Stensby got his first international victory for the year. And then Gopher Boy TJM Taylor Moss got his first international victory for the year. And then, not to be outdone, Rec Poker Steve Fredlin got his 2nd LPP victory for the year.
Wow.
So, Steve, you just need to mail jim@rec.poker and you will get your free month to learn pro poker.
That's right. Steve, I'll talk to a guy I know over there named Ryan. Maybe I can introduce you. Yeah.
That sounds good.
And of course, don't forget that as Jim mentioned earlier, our Heads Up event is going to be on December 18th. So that's, again, you need to sign up beforehand. There is no late registration for that. It will be at 1 p.m. on Saturday, December 18th.
Nice. Well, thanks, John. I know the home game series is winding down. We're coming up to the end of the year, which means that by the time people hear this, it'll still be a chance to play in the second Wednesday of the, nope, it won't. It'll still be a chance to play in December in the last monthly Hold'em home game and the last monthly mixed game. So that's on the first Wednesday and the second Wednesday of December. It's not too late to win your way into the Tournament of Champions, the real championship final two tables that we'll play at the end of December to find out who gets to be the No Limit Hold'em champion of Rec Poker in 2021.
Well, and don't forget, also December 15th, Wednesday, December 15th is going to be the No Limit Hold'em Championship Series Tournament of Champions. So if you won a No Limit Hold'em Championship event, you will be in there. And then we will take the next 6 top point earners to fill out 18 people for 2 tables, and you'll play in the TOC.
And actually, because Steve won his second, we'll actually be taking 7 points earners because
That's
Steve
true.
knocked one of those monthly winners off the list.
I don't get a double stack.
Yeah, that's right. Double stack. let's just let one fewer person in this this year.
I didn't make it last year, so I'm very excited to be able to play in it this year. I didn't qualify last year, so
That explains why you got in there twice this year. That makes a lot of
I'm
sense.
ready.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, but that just
and you
goes
were
to show.
really close last year too. You were just
Yeah,
on
he
the
was
cusp.
right.
I think
It
I
was
needed
rough.
like 4 people to bail or something. I wasn't as close as it could have been.
Well, it's not too late. If you're free that first Wednesday of December, if you win that night, even if you're out of the points race, if you win that night, you still get a seat at the championship match on Wednesday the 15th. So it's not too late to get involved in that, and it's for free. Plus, you can win some pretty cool prizes. So do go check that out. Let me see what else, Chris. I know we're doing so every month. We're doing this Rec Poker seminar with Dara O'Carney, getting some insight from him about how to handle certain spots. This last month, we looked at short stack play. And do you know what you have in mind for next month, or how's it been going so far?
The 2 things I would say is that video, by the time this comes out, that video should be up, and go watch it, because the Dara O'Carney's analysis of sort of the short stack play and ICM spots in the hand that we sent him, I think is fascinating. I think it's one that if you're thinking about these kinds of things and thinking about the importance of them, he really breaks it down. So it's worth watching. That should be up for our premium members. And then our next sort of seminar, Taylor Moss is going to really help me out with this, and we're going to be doing PKOs. We're going to simulate a PKO like we've done with everything else. We're going to try to have a spreadsheet so people understand. It'll be a little bit wonky. We're going to try to figure out how to make it as smooth as possible, but I think that'll be a fascinating conversation, and he has a lot of sort of knowledge about that subject, so we'll have him on helping me out get the video done for that. So that should be a fun, and I know that's a topic a lot of people have really been interested in and learning more about, and how to approach PKOs. So it should be a fun conversation and a fun seminar.
Nice. And to give us a little extra time to put that together, we are changing the schedule a bit in November. So the seminar is normally on the 4th Monday of the month, but we're going to do it on the 5th Monday because there's a 5th Monday in November. So it'll be on the 29th instead. So if you're hearing this and you'd like to join, it's a play and learn seminar. So you get to come play along with the group. Then we record that play. We analyze it from the booth. We send it off to Dara O'Carney to send in his own take. And then the premium members that participate in the playing session get all this personalized feedback from Chris and Taylor and Dara. So yeah, it's just part of what your $15 can get you as a premium member here at Rec.Poker. Or just join for free. I say this every week. Come join Rec.Poker for free. Use the forums, play in the home games, get your question on the podcast, and engage with the group. It's just one of the fun ways that you get to be a part of Rec Poker Nation. But if you don't get a chance to go to YouTube and subscribe, please, and check out the video that we're about to have up there from our man Steve singing "O Canada." Why don't we just put us out of the show here with seeing no more comments from the group? I guess I want to thank website AMP and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino, and of course everyone here for being a big part of this. Now, if I can get myself organized in a smooth and seamless fashion, we'll just say goodnight for tonight and see you all again soon. Oh,
This is perfect. Sorry, technical difficulties. I don't think we'll be able to do it this week.
oh
I
no,
think,
hold on. We
I
are
just think
definitely
it's-
doing it. Okay,
no,
hold
I think
on.
it's-
I'm going to give it one more try. I thought for sure I had my screen
I think
going.
that's a sign.
We saw it, we didn't hear it.
You saw it but didn't hear it?
When you
Okay.
share
Yep.
screen, you got to click sound or something. There's a button on the bottom.
Yeah,
Aha.
share computer sound.
You know what? Thank you, team.
Yeah.
This wouldn't be possible without Jim screwing up the cues here in some official capacity. Thanks everybody, and I hope you enjoy this.
Come, man, with glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true North, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God